We're going to bring our next company to the stage, Dweller Inc., and CEO, co-founder Patrick Quinton. This company creates accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, using modular construction and an innovative ownership structure to reduce cost of housing in dense cities. Patrick.
Thank you, Angela. Oh, did that wrong. Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Quinton. I am the co-founder and CEO of Dweller. And Dweller, as Angela mentioned, we're a startup and we build housing, which is a good thing, right? We need more housing. In fact, we're in the midst of what is probably the worst housing crisis of our lifetime. And despite all the construction activity that you see, we're not catching up. A report was just released this week, which estimates that in Oregon alone, we have a housing deficit of over 150,000 housing units. And what that means is that the pace of household growth in Oregon is outpacing the pace of new housing construction by 150,000 units. That deficit is estimated to be over 7 million housing units nationwide. And the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why we're not catching up, is because we still rely on an outdated method of building new housing. Land, labor, materials, and high-cost markets continue to drive up the cost and the time it's required to build new housing. And on top of that, despite the existence of modular construction processes, most new housing is still built completely on site, adding a whole nother layer of unpredictability and cost to the process. The result is that the average housing unit on the West Coast costs anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 to build and can take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. Now, at Dweller, we build accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, or granny flats, or backyard cottages, whatever you call them. They are now in the housing strategies for communities across the United States, and on the West Coast in particular. And that's because they're usually less expensive to build than other forms of housing, but also because they make efficient use of the massive amounts of underutilized land in our cities, our backyards. Now, you may think, that's great, ADUs are really cool, but is that really a market? Well, the demographic trends would say yes. First off, increasingly, people want to live in dense, single-family urban neighborhoods. And people want to age in those neighborhoods next to their family and their neighbors. And then people are looking to downsize. They're looking to live simpler lives. And on top of that, you have housing prices which are causing homeowners to stretch to buy new homes. And we have homeowners who are now seeking all forms of extra income just to make ends meet. The problem is that the ADU industry suffers from the same complexity and inefficiency and cost as the rest of the construction industry. And on top of that, the ADU industry relies on the homeowner to essentially serve as a developer, managing all of this complexity and providing financing to the project. None of this suggests that the ADU industry, without significant change, is poised to scale. Now, at Dweller, our mission is to dramatically scale the absorption of ADUs, not just on the West Coast, but across the United States. And we're doing that by addressing the primary challenges to building new ADUs. Our two primary innovations are, one, we build all of our units off-site using existing modular processes and capacity, which saves substantial time and money. In Portland, we can build an ADU for an all-in cost of $125,000, and we can do it in about 3 to 4 months. And the second innovation is that we offer the homeowner the option of either buying from us directly, or we'll build the ADU on their property at no cost to them by entering into a ground lease. And it's really the ground lease that opens up the market to the vast majority of homeowners, most of whom don't have equity in their property, don't have access to additional financing. Through a 25-year ground lease, Dweller will build, own, and manage the ADU, we'll rent it out, and we share 30% of the gross monthly rent with the homeowner. But throughout the life of the lease, the homeowner retains the right to buy us out at any time, which effectively serves as an alternative to the financing that is lacking from this market. But what really matters, right, is what they look like. So as you can see, we build attractive, high-quality housing that fits nicely into people's backyards. And on the inside, this looks like any new apartment that you would see on the rental market. Now, we believe that the West Coast is an ideal market to scale this business. Estimates from various cities indicate that the West Coast could add 100,000 new ADUs over the next 5 years. And what's working in our favor is that all of these cities have added ADUs to their housing strategies, and they've done the heavy lifting of updating their zoning codes to remove restrictions on new ADU development. In fact, the states of California and Oregon have both passed state laws which preempt anti-zoning laws at the local level. What's also working in our favor are the economics of installing prefab modular ADUs in tight West Coast rental markets. Even in the highest cost California markets, we can install a cost-effective ADU at comfortable margins when a comparable product would cost 3 to 4 times that. But this business model isn't just built for tight rental markets. Because of our low cost of production, we can absorb flat and even declining rent levels. But what's more important is that we don't have any investment in land. Typical real estate companies have sunk costs in land and are not able to adjust to market conditions. We can adjust our production to fit demand. So with these advantages, we expect to scale in 5 West Coast markets over the next 5 years, installing nearly 1,300 new housing units and creating a rental portfolio with a book value in excess of $80 million, but with a market value much higher given rents in these markets. And with that market presence, we expect to have a business that's profitable next year and is generating significant cash flow and profits in years 4 and 5. It should be noted, though, that like any real estate development business, our leasing model is capital intensive and will require us to continuously access new debt. I'm happy to share that we've just secured our first line of credit, and our business plan outlines how we expect to access additional debt as we grow. Now, our founding team consists of myself and my partner, Brian Leinott. Brian is an experienced entrepreneur, and he's a veteran of the residential real estate industry. Brian has seen many ups and downs in the cycles, but he also knows intimately the inefficiencies in the way that new housing is built. In addition to my career in housing and small business finance, I served for 5.5 years as the executive director of Prosper Portland, which is the development entity for the city of Portland. In that role, I witnessed firsthand as the housing crisis unfolded. But I also saw that there were market opportunities that were being created to help fill in these supply gaps. We've also just added our first employee, and as we grow, we expect to add additional experienced real estate professionals who are looking to move on from the boom and bust cycle of traditional real estate firms for a far more stable development platform. Dweller also benefits from partnerships with 2 well-established real estate brands. All of our units are built by Champion Home Builders. Champion is one of the largest builders of modular and manufactured housing across the United States. They have 28 facilities, so they can easily meet our demand at a predictable cost and quality. Living Room Realty is one of the most recognized real estate agencies in the city of Portland, and they're partnering with us to grow our market presence in Portland, as well as provide property management services for the units that we own. And it's through partnerships like this that we'll be able to scale quickly without adding significant fixed costs. Now, we've achieved a lot in just under 2 years, and in fact, we just installed our first unit at the beginning of this year, and we now have 5 in the ground, and we expect to have our 10th unit in the ground by early next year. By the second half of next year, we would hope to be in a second market, and we're looking to add additional markets in the years after that. This housing crisis is real, and it's not going to get any better unless we bring new ideas and new innovations to the table. Dweller has joined the battle by revolutionizing how ADUs are built and owned. Partner with us and be part of the solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Let's take some Q&A from our esteemed panel.
Okay, great. That was awesome. I'm a big fan. I live in San Francisco. We could very much use this
Yeah,
here.
we're coming to California.
In fact, I live in a dweller, sort of, in the backyard of someone else's house. So I see the need. But yours is much nicer.
That's the future of living.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying here.
I'm doing it for impact reasons. But yeah, just getting some more detail. What is the regulatory landscape or zoning landscape that you're up against in the various markets? Is that a
Well,
problem
it all
at
depends.
Yeah.
So let's just start in Portland. We operate in, I think, the most progressive zoning environment, certainly for ADUs. So our business isn't constrained in any manner by zoning in Portland. Don't get me started on historic districts, but other than that. But as you go outside, yeah, you encounter different zoning and fees. Fees can be more troublesome. But as I mentioned, both California and Oregon, with the state law, you can no longer, as a community, you can't have restrictive zoning laws on ADUs. You can charge high fees, but you have to get rid of the anti-ADU zoning, and that's having a huge impact in California.
Okay.
So many communities are racing ahead in their zoning.
And so this requires, like, if I wanted to have one in my backyard, I would apply for a permit. So there's a permitting.
We would.
So you would do that.
Turnkey.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
we're
cool.
trying to get you as the homeowner out of
Yes.
the business of building housing in your backyard. That's what we're doing. We would become the experts in any market that we're operating in. We take care of permits, obviously installing, doing all site works, anything that would go into putting an ADU in your backyard. We would do that,
Right.
and we either would do it at our own cost, or you would pay us one fixed price.
Awesome. And I see you're doing a lot of the elements of the stack, meaning from installing to financing. So what things you're not doing the building, right? So what parts of the business are you choosing to do, and what parts of the business are you choosing to outsource?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
So we really believe that our kind of core advantage is going to be in having that on the ground expertise that can do everything from customer acquisition through what we call site planning and permitting, but then managing the installation and finishing of the product. We're going to continue to outsource the manufacturer of our units, and right now, if customers are buying from us, they're getting their own financing. But we think financing is an opportunity area for the company because nobody really has figured out how to lend in this industry,
Yeah.
and we believe we're going to be the experts in understanding how this asset performs.
So one last question. So my whole career is in lending. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see the financing on the back end, outside of the equity. Like, how do you do the capital market stuff, and what kind of debt deals do you put together, and what's the economics on a 25-year lease? It sounds like a long payback period.
It depends on the market. We're trying to be have a simple product so that we're going to absorb some of the variations in rent in particular parts of the market. So if we put a unit in one neighborhood in Portland, we'll earn less rent than another neighborhood. We're trying to do our math on the average rent we're going to collect in a market, and then our payback is based on that. But if we can't make money over 25 years with a unit in rental markets that we're talking about, then we shouldn't be in this business.
So talking about the ground lease scenario, that is definitely very capital intensive. And so what is your plan to actually go get that capital and let them make money on it scenario?
So like I mentioned, we've secured our first line of credit, and basically we're having to educate the lending community on this asset, and that's kind of how we're talking about it. But what we believe is that over time they're going to see the cash flows from these units, and then we're going to be able to convince other lenders that this is something that they should be taking a risk on, that it's a solid performing asset like any other credit that they would lend into.
Okay. So one question that has come up before related is building codes, not just the zoning codes, but the building codes. For the tiny house stuff, I've seen that be a preventer of these things being implemented in the past.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad I get to provide that level of detail. So our unit is approved by the state of Oregon, so we can install that unit in any community in Oregon, and the local governments, they don't have the right to apply their own codes. It's built to Oregon building code. So that's going to be how we expand to other markets. If we go to Seattle, for example, we're going to design a unit and have it approved by the state of Washington so that we know going in that our unit is approved no matter where we go in Washington. Same is true of California. And our builder is able to do that. They're able to build a different unit to Washington standards or a different unit to California standards.
Okay. So housing tends to be a very local market, and there are a lot of manufactured home builders out there. How are you going to compete with those guys? You see you're partnering with one, but it seems like all of them are potential competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say it'd be great to see more of them in the space, because we actually think that there's a disconnect between what we call the urban market, the market for ADUs and other manufactured houses, but in cities, in tight spaces, and where the traditional manufacturers and manufactured homes, the markets they serve, they tend to serve, rural and suburban areas. We think there's a real opportunity to bring that capacity to bear on the housing crisis in cities. So a company like ours is basically kind of translating the market to this industry. We would love for Clayton Homes and others to be seeing this as a big market.
Question before we turn it over to the audience. What are the other impact-related aspects to this business? I understand the housing piece, but is there anything about the structure itself which is, green or resource less intensive other than created by pure size? And secondly, what are some big ideas around creating, addressing homelessness and houselessness around this?
So we have explored getting certification for our unit, but every unit would have to be certified in the factory. So right now it's not really practical to do it, but it's built according to Oregon Building Code, which has high energy efficiency standards. But ADUs themselves, they not only add housing, but most sustainability folks advocate them because they take up less space, they use less infrastructure, they generally, and they use space that's not otherwise being used. So ADUs themselves, different than other forms of housing, actually have a positive impact. But in terms of the affordable housing piece, we're not necessarily building, technically affordable housing right now, but what we're trying to do is put a model out there, and there are others, where you can show that we can build housing for a lot less than we're paying right now, and then the amount of subsidy that needs to go in from the public to create truly affordable housing, we minimize that, or we make each dollar go much further. And we're not the only ones. I think there's a lot of folks in housing innovation who are trying to do this, who are trying to show that there's better ways to build housing, to bring the cost down, and then we then have the ability to do more with that housing.
Okay. Who's got our first question from the audience? Let's get the catch boxes rolling. Let's start with Orange.
Hi, Angela. Great presentation. Question is, what happens if small number of years after you put in an ADU, the person sells their house and property? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, we actually hope it's a good moment. They can buy us out at that moment if they choose, or we're happy to assign the lease to the buyer. The legal part of it is they have to do something with it, so they have to do one of those two things. But we're seeing that home values are slowly reflecting the presence of ADUs, so we hope that home sells for a much higher price, and that homeowner then is able to, like I said, either buy us out or take that themselves, and then the new home buyer steps in to their shoes. So
Next question.
So I actually had two questions, but one of them was what he asked. But the other question is, what's to prevent a homeowner who does one of these to throw it up on Airbnb and make money that way and not really solve the housing crisis?
Yeah, good question. I'm glad I get a chance to talk about that. So under our lease model, if we own a unit, it will not be a short-term rental. So we've committed to doing all long-term rentals. And in Portland, they've changed the fee structure. So it's actually, you have to pay full fees now to build an ADU that you want to put on Airbnb or some other short-term platform. So, we're all trending in that way. But we're committed to doing that. If a homeowner buys from us, which we will do, they're free to do with it whatever they choose.
Do we have one last short question?
The
Go
orange. There you go.
Hi, question, besides the permitting and the code, besides that, do you expect any resistance from the secondary mortgage market? If I own a home in a subdivision and I've got a generous backyard and I have a mortgage on my property and I want to put in an ADU, aren't there some covenants and other things that could prohibit that from taking place if I don't own my property free and clear?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things in that. So standard mortgage documents don't prohibit this. They don't prohibit you from renting your home. But if you're in an HOA, yes, there are many HOAs that have restrictions, and I can't tell you off the top of my head right now whether the state laws are preempting that, but it's on the, ADU advocates are going after this next. We're trying to remove those restrictions from the HOA documents because it really does prevent homeowners from accessing this valuable form of housing.
I'm going to cut it off right there. Let's give it up for Patrick Quinton and Dweller Inc.
Thank you.